Louder, the evening sun dipped behind the horizon, painting the small town in fading hues of gold. Inside a worn but tidy little house on the edge of town, louder, Daniel Hayes sat hunched at the kitchen table, his broad shoulders slumped under the weight of exhaustion, his fingers rubbing his temples as he stared at a pile of unpaid bills. Louder, the kitchen was modest, scuffed wooden cabinets, an old refrigerator that hummed too loudly, and a second-hand stove that had seen better days. Still, louder, Daniel kept everything clean. He had to, because this wasn't just his house, it was home to his 8-year-old son, Noah. Louder, the only family he had left after his wife passed away 3 years earlier. From the living room came the sound of Noah's laughter, light and innocent. Louder, as he played with a battered toy truck. That sound was Daniel's anchor, the reason he woke before dawn every day to juggle 2 jobs. Louder, a full shift at the auto repair shop and extra hours delivering groceries in the evenings. He barely slept, but he didn't complain. Every sacrifice was for Noah. Yet tonight, louder, staring at the stack of bills, Daniel felt a knot in his chest. Rent, utilities, Noah's school supplies, medical expenses, the numbers didn't add up. Louder, his wages could stretch only so far, and the repairs the house needed were beyond his reach. He swallowed hard, knowing he was failing in ways he never wanted his son to see. Louder, his gaze drifted down the hallway toward a closed door. The spare bedroom. Once he and his late wife had dreamed of turning it into a nursery for a second child. Louder, life had other plans. The room had stayed empty except for some old boxes and furniture. But now it represented something else, hope. For weeks, louder, Daniel had wrestled with the idea of renting it out. It felt strange inviting a stranger into their lives. He worried about safety, about privacy, about how Noah might adjust. Louder, but he had reached a breaking point. With a deep sigh, he picked up his phone, logged into the local classifieds website, and typed, "Room for rent and family home. Affordable, louder, quiet neighborhood, prefer responsible tenant, inquire within." He hesitated before hitting post. His pride whispered that he should figure things out alone. Louder, that asking for help was weakness. But then, from the living room, Noah called out, "Daddy, look, I built a bridge with my blocks." Daniel smiled faintly. Louder, pushing back the tears burning his eyes, he walked over, knelt by his son, and admired the wobbly construction as if it were the Eiffel Tower. "That's amazing." Louder, "Buddy," he said, ruffling Noah's hair. As Noah beamed with pride, Daniel made his decision. Renting the room wasn't weakness, it was survival. More than that, louder, it was a step toward giving his son the stability he deserved. That night, as he tucked Noah into bed and whispered a promise, "I'll make things better for us." Louder, "I promise." Daniel didn't realize that his simple ad would soon bring someone into their lives who would change everything. The next morning, louder, Daniel's phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. "Hello, I saw your ad for the room. Is it still available?" "Emily." He blinked at the screen, half surprised anyone had replied so quickly. His ad had barely been up for 12 hours. They exchanged a few brief texts. Louder, and Emily agreed to stop by that afternoon to see the room. Daniel tidied up the house between shifts, scrubbing the kitchen counters, vacuuming the carpet. Louder, and even fixing the squeaky hinge on the spare bedroom door. He wasn't sure why he felt nervous. Louder. Maybe it was because this wasn't just a business arrangement. Whoever moved in would share a home with his son. By 4 o'clock, a gentle knock came at the door. Louder. Daniel opened it to find a young woman standing on the porch. She couldn't have been more than 20. Her dark hair was pulled into a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans, louder, sneakers, and a soft gray sweater, no flashy jewelry, no heavy makeup. Just a quiet confidence in the way she carried herself. "Hi," she said, her voice polite but warm. Louder. "I'm Emily. I messaged about the room." Daniel gave a small nod. "Of course." "Come in." She stepped inside, her eyes scanning the living room with quiet appreciation. Louder. The place wasn't luxurious, but it was cozy. Family photos lined the wall, and Noah's crayons and coloring books lay scattered on the coffee table. At that moment, louder, Noah peeked out from the hallway, his toy truck clutched in his small hands. Emily's face lit up. "Hey there," she said with a friendly smile. Louder. "That's a cool truck." No grin, bashful but curious, and Daniel noticed how quickly Emily's tone softened for the boy. That small detail tugged at him. Louder, he showed her the spare room. The space was simple, a bed with a neatly tucked quilt, a wooden dresser. Louder. and a window that looked out onto the backyard where an old swing still hung from a tree branch. "It's nothing fancy," Daniel admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. Louder. "But it's quiet and you'd have privacy." Emily stepped inside, running her fingers lightly along the dresser. "It's perfect," she said. Louder, surprising him with how certain she sounded. Daniel cleared his throat. "Rent's $400 a month, utilities included. I can be flexible if—" But Emily interrupted. Louder, pulling an envelope from her bag and placing it on the dresser. "Here's the first month's rent, in full." Daniel blinked. He hadn't expected her to decide so quickly. Louder let alone hand over cash without hesitation. Most people would have bargained or asked for time. "You sure?" he asked. She nodded, her smile calm but firm. "Yes." "Louder, this feels right." From the living room, Noah's laughter rang out again as he zoomed his truck across the floor. Emily's eyes softened at the sound. Louder, something in her expression, something Daniel couldn't quite read, suggested she wasn't just looking for a place to stay. She was searching for something deeper, belonging. Louder. What Daniel didn't know as he accepted the envelope with quiet relief was that Emily wasn't just an ordinary college student trying to find a cheap room. Louder, she was the daughter of Charles Whitmore, a man whose name appeared in every business magazine. Louder, a millionaire whose wealth could have easily bought her a luxury penthouse near campus. But Emily wasn't here to live in luxury. Louder, she was here to escape it and to live a life where no one saw her as money but as herself. And in this small, humble home, louder, she felt for the first time in years like she might finally be able to do just that. Louder. The days that followed Emily's move in brought small but noticeable changes to Daniel's household. At first, he had expected her to remain distant. After all, louder, she was just renting a room. But within a week, her presence wove itself into the rhythm of their lives in ways Daniel hadn't anticipated. It started with little things. Louder, on her very first morning, Emily appeared in the kitchen earlier than expected, sleeves rolled up, quietly brewing coffee. Daniel bleary-eyed from his late-night delivery shift. Louder froze in the doorway when he saw her. The rich smell of fresh coffee filled the air, and the usually cluttered countertop looked tidier than it had in months. "I hope you don't mind," Emily said, turning with an apologetic smile. "I couldn't sleep, and I saw your coffee maker on the counter." Daniel chuckled softly, Louder, scratching the back of his neck. "Mind? Not at all. You may have just saved my day." From then on, mornings felt lighter. Louder. Emily would sit at the table with her textbooks open, sipping coffee, while Daniel prepared Noah for school. Sometimes she'd help pack his lunch. Louder. Slipping an extra cookie inside and winking at the boy as if sharing a secret. Noah, shy at first, warmed to her quickly. He began leaving his drawings taped to her bedroom door. Louder. Proud gifts of stick figure superheroes and wobbly rainbows. Emily always praised them as though they belonged in a gallery. Louder. Crouching to his level and asking about the stories behind them. One evening after dinner, Daniel came into the living room to find Emily and Noah sprawled on the rug, Louder building a tower from blocks. The boys' laughter rang out as Emily made silly sound effects, pretending the toy dinosaurs were attacking their creation. Louder. Daniel leaned against the doorway, watching the scene unfold. Something stirred inside him, a mixture of gratitude and an ache he couldn't quite name. Louder. Since his wife's passing, the house had often felt heavy with silence, the kind that settled deep into the walls. But now that silence was cracking. Louder. Emily's laughter, gentle, musical, seemed to lift the shadows from the corners. As the weeks passed, Emily proved she wasn't just considerate, she was resourceful. Louder. One afternoon, Daniel came home from the auto shop, grease still under his fingernails, to find Emily in the kitchen again. This time, she had flour on her hands. Louder, and the smell of freshly baked bread filled the air. "I hope you don't mind me using the oven," she said, glancing up sheepishly. Louder. "No, mentioned you usually grab takeout when you're too tired. I thought maybe a home-cooked meal would be nice." Daniel blinked, stunned. Louder. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had cooked for him. The sight of the table, set with plates, salad, and steaming bread, felt almost unreal. Louder. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly. "I wanted to." Emily replied simply, then called out, "Dinner's ready, no!" That night, louder. The three of them sat together at the table like a family. For the first time in years, Daniel felt a sense of normalcy, of warmth, that he hadn't realized he was missing. Louder. He caught himself stealing glances at Emily, wondering what kind of young woman chose to live so simply when clearly she could have been anywhere else. But it wasn't just the meals. Emily began helping Noah with his homework, her patience remarkable. Daniel, often exhausted after long shifts, louder, would listen from the kitchen as she explained math problems in creative ways, turning fractions into pizza slices and multiplication into games. Noah's grades, louder, which had been slipping, started to improve. One night, as she sat with Noah at the table, Emily glanced up at Daniel, who was hunched over a stack of repair shop invoices. Louder. She said gently, "You're really good with your hands. Have you ever thought about opening your own shop?" Daniel looked up, startled. "My own shop?" He laughed, shaking his head. "That's a dream I buried a long time ago. Takes money I don't have. Louder, and risks I can't take with a kid to feed." Emily didn't push, but her eyes held a quiet conviction. "Still, you're more than just an employee." Louder, "I can see how much pride you take in your work. Don't sell yourself short." Her words lingered with him long after she left the table. For years, louder, he had accepted survival as the only option. But Emily's encouragement, so earnest and steady, chipped away at the walls he had built around his hopes. Winter crept in, louder, bringing longer nights and colder mornings. One particularly chilly evening, the heater sputtered out with a clank, and Daniel muttered under his breath as he fiddled with the old machine in the basement. Before he could fix it, Emily appeared behind him, louder, shivering in her sweater but holding a flashlight steady. "Need an extra pair of hands?" she asked. Daniel wanted to protest, to tell her it wasn't her problem, louder, but there was something about the way she looked at him, determined, willing, that made him nod. Together they tinkered, and when the heater roared back to life, Emily grinned. Louder, her cheeks flushed pink from the cold. "You're kind of amazing, you know that," she teased lightly. Daniel's throat tightened. He wasn't used to praise, louder, let alone from someone like her. The bond between them grew slowly, organically, like roots intertwining beneath the soil. Louder. Daniel found himself opening up in small ways, sharing stories about his wife, about the nights he'd stayed up with Noah as a baby, terrified he wasn't good enough. Emily listened, never judging, her eyes soft with understanding. And Emily, though guarded about her own past, revealed glimpses of her struggles too. Louder. She spoke of pressure at school, of people who only cared about appearances, of her desire to carve out a life where she wasn't defined by expectations. Louder. Daniel didn't press for more, but he sensed there was a deeper story she wasn't ready to share. What mattered was the present, their dinners together. Louder, the laughter echoing through the house, the way Noah's world seemed brighter with Emily around. One snowy evening, the three of them sat by the living room window. Louder, watching flakes drift down beneath the streetlight. Noah leaned against Emily's shoulder, half asleep, while Daniel sipped coffee from a chipped mug. Louder. "Thank you," Daniel said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Emily looked at him puzzled. "For what?" "For being here," he said quietly. "For Noah." Louder. "For everything. You've brought life back into this house." Emily's expression softened, her eyes glistening in the glow of the streetlight. Louder. She opened her mouth as if to say something, then stopped, pressing her lips together. There was something unspoken in her gaze, something heavy with meaning. But instead, louder, she simply whispered, "I should be thanking you." Daniel didn't understand what she meant. But in that moment, watching her tuck the blanket around his son, louder, he realized how much she had come to mean to them both. And though he didn't know it yet, louder, the truth about who Emily really was, the truth that would shake his world, wasn't far from being revealed. Snow still lined the streets when everything began to unravel. Louder. The small house that had become a cocoon of warmth and laughter was about to face a storm Daniel never expected. It started on an ordinary Saturday morning. Louder. Daniel was at the kitchen table sipping his coffee while Noah and Emily played a board game on the living room rug. The boys' giggles filled the air. Louder, and Emily's laughter joined in, that same soft, melodic sound that had become so familiar. Then a knock rattled the front door. Daniel frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. Louder. Wiping his hands on a dish towel, he walked to the door and pulled it open. On the driveway sat a sleek black luxury car, a model Daniel had only ever seen in glossy magazines. Behind him, Noah peeked around his legs, his eyes wide at the sight. Two men in dark coats stood on the porch. They were tall, polished, louder, and out of place in Daniel's humble neighborhood. One held an umbrella despite the clear sky, and the other adjusted his cufflinks as though the cold air offended him. Louder. "Good morning," the taller one said smoothly. "We're here for Miss Whitmore." Daniel blinked, confused. "I'm sorry, who?" Before the man could answer, louder. Emily appeared in the hallway, her face pale as paper. She froze mid-step, her hand tightening on the back of Noah's chair. The taller man gave a small bow of respect. Louder. "Miss Emily Whitmore, your father sent us. He's concerned you haven't returned his calls." Daniel turned slowly toward Emily, his mind racing. Whitmore. Louder. The name tugged at his memory, and then, like a puzzle snapping into place, he remembered the Whitmore family, wealth, business empires, magazines with headlines about deals worth millions. His chest tightened. That can't be right. But Emily's silence, her trembling hands, louder, her downcast eyes, told him otherwise. The air in the room shifted. Noah looked from Emily to his father, confused. "Emily, what's going on?" Emily forced a shaky smile, louder, crouching to meet Noah's eyes. "Nothing you need to worry about, buddy." Her voice was soft, but her hands trembled as she smoothed his hair. Daniel's jaw clenched. Louder. "Emily," he said, his voice lower, firmer. "What are they talking about? Who are you really?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again, louder, as though the words lodged in her throat. Finally, with visible effort, she whispered, "It's true. My name is Emily Whitmore. My father, She swallowed. Louder, his Charles Whitmore. The name hit Daniel like a physical blow. Charles Whitmore wasn't just a millionaire. Louder. He was the Whitmore, the kind of man whose name was synonymous with power, wealth, and influence. Louder. The kind of man Daniel had never imagined brushing shoulders with in his lifetime. And she was his daughter. The men on the porch shifted impatiently. "Miss Whitmore." Louder. "Your father is waiting. Please, let us escort you back." But Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I told you I'm not ready to go back yet." Her voice cracked. Louder, raw with emotion. "I wanted time. I wanted to live without all of that." Daniel stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, his thoughts a chaotic storm. Louder, everything she had told him, everything she hadn't, suddenly it all made sense. The way she never seemed concerned about money. The way she avoided personal questions. Louder. The way she had looked at his small, simple house as though it were a sanctuary. But instead of relief, he felt something else rising in his chest, anger. Louder. "You lied to me," he said, his voice sharp. Emily flinched. "Daniel, please, I didn't lie." Louder. "I just didn't tell you everything." "That's the same thing." His hands curled into fists at his sides. "You let me think you were just some struggling student. You watch me worry over bills, watch me stretch every dollar, and you..." He cut himself off, his voice breaking. "Were you pitying us?" Louder. "Playing house with the poor man and his kid." Emily's eyes widened, her tears spilling over. "No, God, no, Daniel, I wasn't pitying you. I wanted this." Louder. "I wanted a real life, friends who didn't care about money, a home that wasn't full of people trying to use me or impress me. With you and Noah, I felt normal." Louder. "I felt seen." But Daniel shook his head, pain etched across his face. "You should have told me the truth from the start. I opened my home to you." Louder. "I trusted you with my son Noah." Sensing the tension, tugged on his father's sleeve. "Daddy, why are you mad at Emily?" His small voice wavered. Louder, his eyes wide with worry. Daniel's chest constricted. He looked at his boy, then at Emily, who knelt on the floor with silent tears streaking her cheeks. For a brief moment, louder, his anger warred with the memory of all the ways she had been there for them. Her laughter, her kindness, her quiet encouragement. But the wound of betrayal still burned too fresh. "You should go," Daniel said hoarsely, turning away from her. Emily's face crumpled. "Daniel," louder, "please." He shook his head, unable to look at her. The men stepped forward, one of them placing a hand on her shoulder. "Miss Whitmore," louder, "let's get you home." Emily rose slowly, her legs unsteady. She paused at the doorway, her eyes lingering on Noah's small frame, then on Daniel's turned back. Louder, "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Everything I said, everything I did, it was real." And then she was gone. Louder. The door closing softly behind her, leaving silence heavy in her wake. That night, Daniel lay awake long after Noah had fallen asleep. Louder. The house felt emptier than it had in years. He replayed every moment, her helping with homework, her laughter at dinner, her words about his dream. Had it all been a lie? Louder. Or had it been the only truth she knew how to give? He didn't know. All he knew was that the quiet warmth she had brought into their lives was gone. Louder. And in its place was a hollow ache he couldn't shake. Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft and relentless, as if the world itself mourned what had been lost. Louder. The house had never felt so silent. Days passed since Emily's departure, but Daniel still caught himself expecting to hear her laughter in the kitchen. Louder, or Noah's voice calling her name from the living room. Instead, there was only the hollow echo of absence. Noah asked about her constantly. When is Emily coming back? Louder. Daddy, he'd say, tugging at Daniel's sleeve. She promised she'd help me finish my science project. Daniel's throat would tighten each time. Louder, he'd force a smile for his son's sake, but his answers grew weaker by the day. I don't know, buddy. Maybe she got too busy. But in the quiet of the night, when Noah was asleep and the world outside was hushed beneath winter's blanket, Daniel admitted the truth to himself. He missed her too, more than he thought possible. Louder. Her absence gnawed at him, not just because she had filled their days with warmth, but because she had awakened something inside him. Hope. Louder, even a fragile sense of belonging, and he had driven her away. A week later, a knock sounded at the door. Daniel, bracing himself for another bill collector or delivery, opened it and froze. Standing on the porch was a tall man in an immaculate overcoat, flanked by the same black car that had appeared days earlier. Louder, his presence radiated authority, the kind that came from decades of commanding boardrooms and bending markets to his will. Mr. Hayes. The man asked in a deep, louder, measured voice. Daniel nodded warily, yes. The man extended his hand. Charles Whitmore. May I come in? The name struck like a drumbeat. Louder, Daniel's instinct screamed to slam the door, but politeness, or perhaps curiosity, won out. He stepped aside. Whitmore entered. Louder, his sharp eyes sweeping over the modest living room with its worn sofa and scattered toys. Yet, instead of disdain, something softer flickered in his gaze. Emily has spoken much about you, Whitmore said finally, his voice low. She hasn't stopped since she returned. Daniel stiffened. Louder. If you're here to take her away for good, you can save yourself the trouble. She doesn't belong in a house like this, not with people like us. Whitmore turned. Louder, his brow lifting slightly. Is that what you believe or what you're afraid of? Daniel bristled. I don't have the kind of life she deserves. Louder. She'll be better off with her family, her wealth, her world. But Whitmore's gaze sharpened. You're wrong. Emily doesn't want wealth. Louder. She's had that her entire life. What she doesn't have, and what she found here, is honesty. A life where people care for her without an agenda. Louder. Do you think she would have chosen to live here in this simple home if she wanted anything else? Daniel faltered, his fists unclenched, his defenses wavering. Louder. Whitmore's expression softened slightly. My daughter has everything money can buy, Mr. Hayes. But happiness, belonging, she found that with you and your boy. And I would be a fool to take that from her. Before Daniel could reply, footsteps approached the doorway. Emily. She looked different, no expensive clothes. Louder, no trace of glamour. Just Emily in her jeans and sweater, her face anxious as her eyes found his. Daniel, she whispered, her voice trembling. For a long moment, louder. Silence stretched between them. Then Daniel spoke, his tone rough. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me feel like a fool? Emily stepped closer, louder, tears brimming in her eyes. Because I was scared. Every time someone finds out who I am, everything changes. People treat me differently. Louder. They want something from me, or they push me away. I didn't want that with you. I wanted you to see me. Her voice cracked. And you did. For the first time in my life, someone saw me without the Whitmore name, without the money, without the expectations. Just Emily. That's why I stayed. Louder. That's why I didn't tell you. Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to hold on to his anger, but her words pierced through the walls he'd built. Louder. He remembered her laughter with Noah, the meals she cooked, the way she'd looked at him when she urged him to dream again. None of that had been fake. Noah. Louder. Woken by the voices, padded sleepily into the room. His eyes lit up when he saw Emily. You came back, he cried, running into her arms. She hugged him tightly. Louder. burying her face in his hair. Daniel watched them, his heart aching. Maybe she had lied by omission, but she had never lied with her actions. Finally, he spoke louder, his voice softer now. I don't care about your money, Emily, I never will. But if you want to be here with us, I need you to be honest. No more secrets. Emily's eyes shimmered with relief as she nodded, clutching Noah tighter. No more secrets, I promise. Whitmore, who had watched silently, stepped forward. He looked at Daniel with something resembling respect. You are a man of pride, Mr. Hayes. I can see why my daughter admires you. Louder, I came here expecting to take her home. Instead, I find she already has one. Daniel blinked, stunned. Whitmore continued, his voice calm but firm. Louder. If you ever decide to open your own shop, know that I would consider it an honor to invest, not as charity, but as recognition of a man who refuses to quit, even when the world stacks the odds against him. Daniel hesitated, pride and humility warring inside him. Finally, he nodded slowly. Louder. I'll think about it. As Whitmore departed, Emily remained. That night, the three of them sat at the kitchen table, just as they had before. Dinner wasn't fancy. Louder, just pasta and bread, but it felt like a feast. Emily laughed with Noah over his science project, and Daniel watched them. Louder, his heart swelling with something he hadn't felt in years, hope. Later, when Noah had gone to bed, Daniel found himself standing beside Emily at the window, Louder, watching the snow drift under the streetlights. You really want this? He asked quietly. A life here, with me and Noah? Emily turned, her eyes steady, Louder, her voice unwavering. More than anything, Daniel studied her for a long moment, then reached for her hand. Her fingers slipped into his, warm and certain. Louder. For the first time in years, the future no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a promise. And though the world outside still turned with wealth and power and struggle, louder. Within the walls of that little house, there was something greater, trust, love, and the beginning of a family reborn.